Hello everyone, welcome back to LifeLens TV, where we focus on matters that affect our country and the world at large. I'm your host, Tosh Williams, and today we're going to discuss a very important and controversial topic that has been making headlines in Kenya: the proposed takeover of Jomo Kenyatta International Airport by the Adani Group from India. This is a topic that has raised serious concerns, and as always, I want to break it down for you bit by bit. This way, you can form your own opinion on whether this is a good or bad deal for Kenya. Let's dive right in. So, what is this deal all about? In simple terms, the Adani Group, a massive corporation from India, is looking to take over the management of JKIA, Kenya's largest and most important airport. They're not buying the airport, but leasing it for 30 years. On the surface, it sounds like a public-private partnership where Adani will manage the airport and improve it. But here's where things get murky. According to a lawsuit filed by activist Tony Gachoka and a group called the Mount Kenya Jurists, Adani is not planning to invest its own money into the project. Instead, they want to use JKIA's assets, including its title deed, to secure loans. Now this is where the first major issue arises.
Dear friends, after a fully subscribed app.
Normally, when a big company like Adani takes over a project, we expect them to invest their own money, right? But in this case, they want to use JKIA's title deed to get a loan. So essentially, the airport itself will be used as collateral for Adani to get loans. The concern here is, if JKIA's assets are being used to secure loans, what exactly is Adani bringing to the table? Why should they control JKIA if they're not investing their own money? Couldn't the Kenyan government do the same thing, take out a loan using JKIA's title deed and manage the airport without giving up control? These are important questions we need to consider. This brings us to the next point: the financial risk to the Kenyan taxpayer. According to the lawsuit, the Kenyan government will be a guarantor for the loans that Adani takes out using JKIA's title deed. What does this mean for you and me? It means that if things go wrong, if Adani fails to pay back the loans, it's the Kenyan taxpayer who will foot the bill. So, we're talking about potentially billions of shillings being risked in a deal where we don't even know how much Adani is going to invest, if anything at all. Is this sovereign robbery? The activists and legal experts involved in this case are calling this sovereign robbery. They argue that what's happening here is that the existing and potential revenue of JKIA is simply being handed over to Adani. For the next 30 years, Adani could collect money from JKIA, but with very little financial input from their side. This is why the lawsuit uses such strong language. The plaintiffs are saying that this is not a fair deal for Kenya, and that it's essentially stealing from the Kenyan people who will be left holding the bag if things go wrong. Another big issue with this deal is the lack of transparency. The lawsuit argues that the process of approving this deal has been rushed and done without proper public participation. Think about it. JKIA is a national asset, something that belongs to all Kenyans. Shouldn't the people have a say in such a major decision? Shouldn't the process be open and transparent so we can see if this deal is actually in the best interests of the country? According to the lawsuit, this has not happened and the deal has moved forward without enough scrutiny. One of the most alarming aspects of this deal is that any disputes that arise from the concession agreement will not be handled by Kenyan courts. Instead, the deal is structured so that disputes will be governed by English law. This essentially takes away the power of Kenyan courts to oversee matters involving one of our most important national assets. This raises serious questions about sovereignty. How can we trust that the interests of Kenya will be protected if our own courts don't have jurisdiction over the deal?
Dear friends, after a fully subscribed FPO,
there's also suspicion that this deal has been pushed through in favor of Adani over other potential investors. In 2023, the Kenya Airports Authority announced that they were reviewing 6 different proposals for JKIA and other airports. But according to the lawsuit, high-level officials have conspired to ensure that Adani's proposal received favorable treatment. This raises questions about the integrity of the procurement process. Were other investors, who may have offered better terms for Kenya, pushed aside? Was there a fair competition to find the best partner for JKIA? Let's talk about what this deal actually focuses on. According to the lawsuit, Adani's proposal focuses on terminal and city-side developments at JKIA. Now, those are important, no doubt, but a consultant had previously recommended that a second runway should be a priority. Why? Because JKIA needs to increase its capacity for takeoffs and landings, especially if we want to grow as a major international hub. So why did the government choose a proposal that seems to ignore such a critical piece of infrastructure? Again, it raises questions about whether the deal truly serves the long-term interests of the airport and the country. Before we dive into the conclusion, let's take a step back and look at Adani Group's global track record. This company has been involved in massive infrastructure projects around the world, but not all of them have been without controversy. Take, for instance, Adani's coal mining project in Australia. This project has faced fierce opposition from environmental groups, not only for its potential impact on the climate, but also due to the delays and challenges in its execution. In fact, Adani has had to deal with years of protests and legal battles before even beginning operations. Additionally, Adani's management of ports and airports in other countries has raised questions about how well they deliver on their promises. Some argue that while they do invest in upgrades and expansions, the benefits are often skewed in their favor, leaving the host countries with fewer long-term gains than expected. So, when thinking about JKIA, it's important to ask, are we getting a partner that will truly invest in Kenya's future, or are we repeating the same issues that other countries have faced? This context is crucial when evaluating the deal's potential impact on our national assets. Now, let's take a moment to consider what potential benefits this deal with Adani could bring to Kenya, even with all the concerns raised. First, Adani is known for modernizing infrastructure, and their involvement could lead to much-needed upgrades at JKIA. This might mean better airport facilities, more efficient services, and an overall boost in the experience for travelers. Such improvements could increase tourism, attract more business travelers, and position JKIA as a key hub in East Africa. Moreover, a modernized airport could have ripple effects on the economy, potentially leading to job creation, increased investment in related sectors, and enhanced global connectivity. If these benefits are fully realized, it could be argued that Kenya would see a significant boost in its aviation industry. But the real question is, at what cost? Will these benefits outweigh the risks posed by the deal, especially considering that Adani might not be putting its own money on the line? That's for us as Kenyans to weigh carefully. Alternatives to Adani's proposal. Lastly, before we wrap up, let's talk about alternatives. What other options does Kenya have aside from the Adani deal? For one, the government could consider developing JKIA using its own resources. While this may sound ambitious, it could avoid exposing taxpayers to the kind of risks we've discussed, such as guaranteeing loans using JKIA's title deed. If the revenue JKIA generates each year is well managed and reinvested, the government might be able to fund necessary improvements without relying on a third party. Another option could be partnering with a different investor who is willing to inject capital directly into the project. This could provide a safer, more balanced approach to upgrading the airport's infrastructure without putting national assets at risk. There might be other potential investors out there who are willing to bring more to the table than Adani has shown so far. In short, the Adani deal isn't the only path forward. There are alternatives, and it's worth considering if any of them might better serve Kenya's interests without exposing us to such significant risks. At the end of the day, this isn't just a story about a business deal. This is a story about who controls Kenya's most important airport, and how that decision will affect you, the taxpayer. If JKIA's revenues are used to service loans that Adani takes out, what happens to the money that could have been used for improving the airport or even for other national projects? What happens if the deal doesn't go as planned and the Kenyan taxpayer is left to pick up the pieces? This deal also fits into a bigger global trend. We've seen situations where foreign companies take control of key infrastructure in other countries, and sometimes those deals don't work out well for the host nation. Sri Lanka, for example, had to hand over control of one of its ports to a Chinese company after failing to pay back loans. Is this the direction Kenya wants to go in with JKIA? In conclusion, there's a lot at stake here. The proposed takeover of JKIA by Adani Group is more than just a business deal. It raises questions about Kenya's financial future, national sovereignty, and the long-term sustainability of one of our most important assets. Should we allow a foreign company to control JKIA without making any significant capital investment? Should we risk taxpayer money for a deal that might not benefit us in the long run? I've laid out the facts, and now it's up to you to decide. Let me know what you think in the comments. Is this a good deal for Kenya or a bad one? And as always, stay tuned to LifeLens TV for more in-depth discussions on the issues that matter most to you. I'm Tosh Williams, signing off. Until next time.